Hey all, right now I have my mama bear staying with me. And so I thought I'd talk about this a little bit because I don't know if people talk about it very much. We're here to talk about all the real things that happen in a real life of a hardworking professional who's trying to have a balanced life outside. So something that I've noticed is that when I'm super wrapped up in my professional life, which ends up falling into a pattern, I expect the weekdays to go a particular way, the weekends to go a particular way. I tend to rely on certain friends for my social life. I tend to rely on certain workout classes for my physical needs and things like that. All of a sudden, you have your parent staying with you, and you're like a grown adult. And it's always really nice for a little bit because unless you have strained relationships with your parents, you're usually like, okay, yay, I get to see my parent, get to see fill in the blank with whichever close family member it is. But what happens is invariably after a little bit of the excitement and joy of being together, you're like, this is messing up my flow. And I feel so much guilt about the fact that it does mess up my flow and that I'm annoyed about it. And so I wanted to make a video about it because it is something I think is complicated, actually. Not complicated, but like nuanced. So here's the thing. If you're working in a very fast-paced society and you're working in a competitive and high-pressure industry, you have probably learned a lot of coping mechanisms that you don't even realize are coping mechanisms that a lot of people would probably think are a little bit unreasonable or selfish or cruel. And I started realizing this is what everyone's doing back when I lived in New York City through my dating life. So back when I was in law school and a young lawyer in my 20s in New York City working at top white shoe firms, I remember thinking that it was really, really hard to date in New York City because most of the guys that I would date were also working in really high pressure companies where the quality of work and the quantity of time that you put in are really, really high. And places like New York City and industries like law and finance and medicine, they can demand that of you. And when you're early on in your career, you don't have the choice really to say no. So I would date these guys who always had to do jujitsu at 5 a.m. And they never wanted to, do a date on a Sunday night or spend the night on a particular night because it would mess up their whole weekend. It's like living in a high pressure city and working in a high pressure industry. You basically have to maximize your week so that you can get the most out of it. And that means honing your routines down to a T. It's figuring out the time in the week that you can do your laundry while doing something else that's productive, that makes laundry take the least amount of time, especially dead time. And then it's figuring out which times of the day you can get in and out of the gym so that your gym is not like a 4-hour daily routine. And it's figuring out what time you can get to bed so that you can get that super early workout class so that you can still feel like you have a long weekend work day. And maybe you want to put in extra hours on the weekend because you're trying to have that edge and get in all those hours. And so basically, it doesn't always have to look exactly like this. But the point I'm making is that in certain cities where you have a lot of talent and in certain industries where there's like really coveted opportunities that everyone wants and everyone's willing to make unreasonable sacrifices for, it's very hard to be counterculture. It's very hard to be counterculture. You kind of have to fit the culture you're in, or you have to say, I'm not going to be part of this culture, which means you leave the industry, you leave those environments, and you either build your own institution, your own industry, and find a way to still meet the costs that living will be in the places where you have the high-paying industries, or you just leave the geography entirely, which is kind of something I did, which we can talk about in some later videos, since I haven't done anything too autobiographical yet. But it's very hard to be counterculture in very competitive cultures because you don't have the upper hand, not when you're a young employee and there is a big urban city full of people willing to do what you're not willing to do. So at that point in your career, it's really hard to not just do what everyone else is doing, to try to stay employed and competitive, which is to also maximize your life for your profession. And this is where I feel the toxic productivity culture begins. It begins with oversupply and unnaturally high competition, which allows big industries to raise the bar of what they expect as a baseline of normal from their employees. And the reason I'm mentioning this and talking about it is because I do think it relates to why I have a hard time when my routines get thrown off. I think I've had a long battle with myself over the years of how smart or talented am I actually, and how much is it that I've just come up with systems that allow me to do the little extra that a lot of people aren't willing to do. So it's study that extra, put in a few extra hours at the law firm, per day, per week, per month, whatever. How much of it is me going the extra mile and how much of it is innate talent? And the bottom line is that it's probably a mix. I do think I have a lot of gifts that I have been born with and blessed with. I think I have a lot of gifts that I have cultivated. And then I think I have a lot of habits that have helped me have an edge at times where I don't have a particular gift. But in a place like New York City, in competitive industries, from the time you're in law school, from the time you're in undergrad, honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, from the time you're in school, a lot of us have been conditioned, if we're high achievers, to use habits to get an edge where we don't know if we have enough innate talent to have that edge on our own. And so I think we're kind of groomed to have a very low margin of error and flexibility. And so unless you, again, are just so innately intelligent or so innately like physically attractive or athletic, you probably have to put in a lot of work. And so a lot of the work's not pleasant. It's not fun to just, not all workouts are fun. A lot of them are just tedious. A lot of studying is not fun, it's just tedious. And we come up with systems that allow us to do these tedious things at a really high level in a really competitive place. And then when those systems get disrupted, we kind of unravel and go into a state of panic, and it's very uncomfortable to be there. And so we become more rigid. And I think in the world of men, and I've seen this, honestly, I can think of a lot of people I've dated even in undergrad, and I was in a pretty competitive undergrad, that a lot of men just couldn't handle that flexibility. They just kind of shy. They instead of being flexible, they just kind of vanish. They become less communicative, and you start feeling neglected. And I feel that women try to be a little more flexible more often. But what I'm getting at is when you suddenly then have to do something as basic as take care of relatives, people you love, friends, family, and they encroach on these routines that you have developed as a survival mechanism in a really competitive city or industry, it's really easy to just go into a state of discomfort and panic. And I do think this has a lot to do with why in our generation people have a hard time cohabiting. I think it's harder for relationships to last and marriages to last because we're not growing up with society helping us learn how to compromise and have more tolerance and have more flexibility and be okay with not producing perfect work product and not being available all the time and not looking perfect all the time. No, for some reason, I think our society gives the messaging that the perfection and the sacrifice is the noble thing. Yesterday was a really significant day for me in terms of, I'll make a separate video about it being a particular milestone since my father passed away. And I think I first learned this lesson about why making those unreasonable sacrifices probably is not as worth it as you think when you're hungry and ambitious at the bottom of the totem pole. But you get into this habit, which starts when you're hungry and ambitious and at the bottom of the totem pole, of making these sacrifices of not attending those birthday parties and those dinners and those multi-hour catch-ups with your friends and the sleep-ins when you're cuddling with your significant other and the days that you indulge in a pancake breakfast and skip the gym. Like you start when you're young maximizing everything for your career, but if you don't learn how to loosen up and let go of that mentality when it no longer serves you, you can end up being someone who doesn't know how to be kind, compassionate, and loving to the people who matter the most in the world at the times where you really need to have those skills. And they're hard skills. They're like muscles you have to develop. So this has been a really long video now, and I've kind of been rambling, but I kind of want to bring it together by saying I am still struggling in my mid-30s with having unexpected guests and events come into my life, you know, shake up my routines, and to stay pleasant and calm. Like, I'm making this video to remind myself how important it is to be gracious and calm and loving to my mom, because I'm lucky that she's alive and she's here with me and helping me, instead of being annoyed that sometimes we're up late at night talking and catching up on life, and then I'm missing this early workout the next day, or that I'm not going to get to go to some dinner my friend invited me to, who lives where I live, who I can have a dinner with another time. I can see in my own body impulses that the annoyances are there. Like, I'm getting annoyed and I'm aware of it. And I've started doing things like taking a walk or taking a jog so that I don't act in a way that I won't be proud of when I can feel that I'm annoyed about something that somewhere in the back of my mind, I know I shouldn't even be annoyed about in the first place. But I can tell that I'm annoyed. I can diagnose why I'm annoyed. And it's from years of maximizing. It's from years of maximizing. So I wanted to make this video to talk about, again, having a free spirit and being a high achieving professional. You have to know when maximizing is absolutely necessary. And there will be seasons where it's necessary if you're doing a trial, if you're doing a particular project or a deal. But you have to know if you want to honor your yang or honor your spirit, your soul, and the people who you love the most, when to minimize. Don't just maximize your whole life. I don't think that is the way to live the most well-lived life. We're here seeking a path that allows us to feel like we lived a full life, a well-lived life. And to do that, sometimes you got to minimize some things, minimize achievement, be a little less ambitious, care a little bit less, be okay with getting a shout out, but knowing that that's because you are making an intentional decision to prioritize the things that are the most important to you in the season that you're focused on. So I just wanted to make this video. I'm going to check in with you guys as my mom stays with me. I want to use this channel to stay accountable and teach myself some new skills for emotional coping and for letting go and relaxing and being more pleasant and tolerant, which I've not learned those skills very well. I think my cousins who grew up honestly in Pakistan probably learned them better, because in Pakistani culture, there's a far higher value placed on treating your family members and your close family and the elders in your life with respect and with love, and for being flexible and sacrificial. And I don't think that's the messaging that you get in the United States, particularly in high pressure careers and in competitive cities. They reward the selfish, me first, work first attitude. And I really do think it sometimes comes at too high of a cost, and it can kind of corrupt your life. So don't let it. So with that, I will come back and check in with you guys in a few days, let you know how my emotional tolerance muscles are being built and how I'm coping with having some changes to my life. But I decided to come out and make a video to prove to myself that I'm not going to throw all my goals and habits by the wayside and give myself more reasons to be resentful about my routines being shattered. So making videos is my way of saying, I'll find a different way to get the things in that I need, but we're going to get them in, and we're still going to be flexible and have a good time with mom. So until the next one, wishing you the best from the Free Spirit Lawyer. Bye.